Hey there, coaches. I'm Rich Prado, owner of Play In School and host of Travel Ball Talk, where I talk to travel ball coaches from the best organizations about the current and future state of travel baseball. Today's guest is Jason Slattery, GM of Chandler World. The Chandler Bat Company has had different levels of involvement in the travel ball world over the last few years, but I think it's safe to say that they're here to stay. In this conversation, Jason gets us up to speed with Chandler's commitment to teams. We also get into a very interesting conversation about international players and how they are impacting Chandler, as well as how Chandler is impacting them. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Travel Ball Talk. Well, here we are again on another call. Today we got Jason Slattery from Chandler World. Hey, Jason, how you doing?
Good, man. How you doing, Rich?
I'm doing pretty good. I appreciate you jumping on with me. We're recording this in mid-December. You guys probably won't hear it until sometime in first quarter of 2019. But before we hopped on the call, and Jason asked me how I was doing, and I said, "Well, I'm, shin deep in snow. We got a surprise snowstorm," and then. To which you responded. Tell us how you responded to that, and tell us where in the world you currently sit.
Yeah, so I responded saying it's pretty chilly down here. It's a balmy 74 down here in Central Florida. So my organization, the Chandler World organization, is based out of Orlando. And I was joking that at 74, given I'm originally from snow country, upstate New York, it's sad that I actually put on long pants at 74 degrees because that's become chilly to me after 8 years being in Florida.
To which I wiped a tear from my chin, my cheek. Yeah, because it's not like that here. Jason and I connected recently. As with many coaches who. It seems that Twitter has sort of become the baseball place to network and to debate and to get to know new people. And I've actually made a lot of really good friends straight through Twitter. And so for those of you listening at home, Jason and I are no different. We hooked up on Twitter not long ago, and we're like, dude, we got to get on a phone call. We got on a phone call, and I basically just said, stop. We got to record this thing because there was a lot of kind of pieces to the conversation that I found to be personally interesting, and I hope that the listener at home, finds some interest in and maybe some value in. If this is the first time hearing what has now become known as Travel Ball Talk, at least for the moment, these conversations are with coaches from the best organizations in travel baseball. And hopefully we're going to be able to learn something that we can implement with our own organizations, whether it be down in Orlando or whether it be in the Pacific Northwest. You might not have the same weather, but there's hopefully some little tips and tactics that we can share. Now, Jason, you're not what I would call a baseball only guy. We've had a variety of different guys that come from a variety of different backgrounds, but you don't do baseball only. You're a corporate guy, aren't you?
Correct. Correct. I as a day job, what I do is I'm a headhunter with one of the preeminent executive search firms focused on the venture capital and technology industry. Think Silicon Valley. So
you would say, in a way, in your professional life, you're placing elite prospects. Do you think that has any crossover with what you're doing in baseball?
I think it is 90% correlated.
That's it's
amazing
awesome.
How similar the two processes are, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, when I'm talking to parents, and obviously 99% of the parents, it's their first and only time going through recruiting. And they got the deer in the headlights look. Usually I simply ask them if they've ever been through a job search. Okay, and then when you talk about that recruiting, the recruiting process, it's basically a job search. They get it, and they can take a deep breath, and there's a little sigh of relief because they have that experience, to kind of support their kid and understand kind of, at least on a base level, what their kid's going through. The recruiting process is usually just a little bit longer of a process than a job search.
Yes, it is. That's for sure. And it has a few more variables. Okay.
Let's talk about those. What are right off the cuff? What are some of the variables that you see of a teenager going through recruiting versus a seasoned, white collar executive that you're placing in your professional day?
I would say, one of the fundamental differences between the two audiences, right, or clientele, is when you're dealing with, executives, C-level executives and professionals, they have a history, a track record that is measurable. Think of it in terms of if they have a resume.
Yep.
Right. And they also tend to have a pretty firm grasp of what they are qualified for, and what the opportunities and the high quality companies are in the market. Now compare that to a high school amateur baseball player. In general, there's less succinct definition of what that is for them, because the resume is relatively short, right? We're talking a couple years. And now if you look at it today, obviously players are attending showcases and getting on the showcase circuit at a younger age, right? And that's starting earlier in an amateur baseball player's career, but we're talking about a couple years experience versus a CEO of a technology company that's been doing this for 15, 20 years. And there's just more definition with the seasoned executive. When you're talking about amateur baseball players, you also have the variable of their parents. You have the variable of their finances, right? You can't imagine how many conversations I have on a weekly that nobody takes their personal and family finances into account. So those are some of the variables that I think exist with the showcase amateur baseball player in comparison to seasoned senior executive.
The first thing that came to my mind is how the college coach has to look into a crystal ball and make a prediction or a projection, right? As opposed to looking at a 15-year resume with a history of successes. You're basically looking at the skill set and saying, can this play? Does this work at my level? When you're talking about, hey, can this kid hit in the SEC in 2 years? And he's never obviously had a chance to hit in the SEC versus your executives. Oh, they've had at bats at the highest level. That's a really neat. I appreciate. I'm kind of glad I asked that question, and I think you answered it very well. Now I want to take a step a little bit backwards and find out about Chandler World, how that came to be, and how you came to get involved. Can you tell us the story about the whole background there and your involvement?
Yep. Yeah, so the origination of the Chandler World program actually predated me, albeit it wasn't an organization. It was an idea that David Chandler, CEO and founder of Chandler Bats, had, which was to put a team out in, and I think the original tournament was Jupiter, to put a team together that represented and was sponsored by the Chandler Bat organization. The reason we're actually called Chandler World and the origination of Chandler World is that original team was a pure or primarily, pure is probably an overstatement, primarily an international team. And they could only play exhibitions at WWBA World Championships in Jupiter. So fast forward, program went on for about a year after that, and they started just like everybody else, a traditional tryout. You put your teams together, you set your schedule, you market your players to colleges, and the initial year didn't really go that well. So David Chandler approached me, and I got connected to David through former Major League player Pedro Feliz, and actually said, well, I need somebody to run this thing, because he was trying to be a bat maker and a travel baseball owner at the same time.
Sure.
And it's just impossible to do that. So he'd asked me to take over as essentially the owner and general manager of Chandler World. So I agreed to do that with one caveat. I was not going to move to Pennsylvania. We would have to do it and relocate the program and kind of start over from scratch in Florida, which we did. So after that initial, market entry point for Chandler World, I took over. David gave me the keys and basically said, keep doing what you're doing. And the fast forward was we had our first tryout. I think it was 4 years ago now. We had about 200 kids show up to our tryout, which actually surprised me, to be honest with you. And we're about to enter our 5th summer as a Florida-based organization, and we've grown leaps and bounds. I mean, my initial summer, I said 1 team per grad year. I didn't want to overpromise and underdeliver on the caliber of the experience for the players and their families, but I would anticipate now, 5 years later, we'll be somewhere around 6 to 8 teams next summer.
At each age group?
Total.
Okay, got it. So probably about two teams per age group at the older age groups. Cool.
Correct.
Well, that's pretty cool. Chandler.
Yep.
And his name's. Would you say his name is David?
David Chandler. Yep, the founder of Chandler Bats.
So David wanted to keep making bats. He realized he needed somebody to come in and take over the reins, which you have done. Now, you're based in Central Florida. Is that basically the Orlando area for those of us not from Florida?
Yes, we're based in the Orlando area.
Okay.
Our facility, which we're actually upgrading here in a couple weeks, is based in the western half of Orange County.
Okay.
So think of west of Orlando. That is our home base.
And at this point and moving forward, are the majority of your kids from right there within your own area code, your own state of Florida, or beyond into other states at this point?
Yeah, I would say if you look at our organization in general, a good portion are still Florida-based. So a good portion are Florida-based, and we have a pretty decent contingent, actually, of international players, and a growing contingent. So if you look at, if you're really like, hey, what is Chandler World? Where are you guys from?
Yeah.
There's no doubt that the lion's share of our players originate in the state of Florida. However, we have players from Michigan, Rhode Island, Colorado. I actually, a couple of years ago, had a player named Trevor Candelaria who was born and raised in Durango, Colorado. He actually went to Montverde Academy and hooked up with us along the way and played for us for 2 years, and he's now a freshman at Davidson. So still Florida-based in general, with a handful of players from other states and a growing contingent from Venezuela, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Colombia, etc.
Okay, so that's super interesting to me. You look at the normal, and I think I'm going to jump a step ahead. The normal travel ball, the local team, their whole goal is to move the guy up to the college level, right?
Correct.
Now, those of us who've been around the block know that a lot of the guys you're talking about from Venezuela, from the Dominican Republic, etc., in a lot of circumstances, those aren't college-bound kids. They might be, and I want to talk about that a little bit. But their goal is the big leagues. Their goal is pro baseball. So let's talk about how it came to be that you started having more and more of these international guys, and sort of how does that help you, and then vice versa, how does Chandler help those kids?
Yep. Yeah, I think so. My view is this, and if you look at the traditional powerhouse travel baseball organizations, we all know who they are, right? They don't really have a strong contingent of international players because their stated mission and vision is to help amateur high school baseball players obtain college scholarships, right, and opportunities.
Yeah.
And if their talent warrants it, they end up with players that go directly to the draft.
Sure.
I can remember, playing a couple years ago against the Central Florida Gators and Joe Mercandante's team before he went to Stetson. And we played them down in Fort Myers. I'm like, half this team's going directly in the draft. I was sort of right, but I was also sort of wrong. But at the same time, my view, particularly around the Chandler World organization, if you think about it, how we started, which had an international flavor and focus to it, in the end, we're just trying to help amateur baseball players achieve their dream of playing baseball at the next level. Mm-hmm. If you are a player who is not from this country and you want to showcase your talents in front of colleges and pro scouts, we wanted to provide a platform for those players. And if you think about it, over the last 5 years, what has happened in the professional baseball ranks, international scouting and the budgets that teams have invested and the camps that Major League Baseball teams have set up in these countries, it is clearly a heavier focus for them now compared to what it was 4 or 5 years ago. Baltimore Orioles, when they changed their organizational structure and management, one of their primary goals was to become more invested in the international market. They were missing out on players. And so my view of that is it isn't traditional, because the traditional showcase summer, showcase travel organization is built for a U.S.-based amateur high school baseball player.
Yeah.
And there's just not a ton of organizations that are open to or interested in assisting the same player if they're based in another country and want to come here and play.
I got a bunch of questions that kind of jump off the page at me. The first, I'll mention a few, and then maybe you can run with it. The first
Sure.
is how do you find these guys? The second is how do these guys? How are they paying? None of this stuff is free. It all costs money. How is that handled? Are these kids foreigners that come from wealthy families? Take that and run with it. Why don't you start with those two? How do you find them? How do they find you?
Yep.
And how are we covering costs for some of these kids?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the how do I find them and how do they find Chandler. So number one, Chandler has been a preeminent brand and well-respected bat company in Latin America and the international market for the last several years.
Sure.
It is, more and more players view Chandler as like the Rolls Royce of Major League quality wood bats. And I think that's something that David has earned through hard work and iteration on exactly how he finishes and produces bats. So quite frankly, we already have a native audience there.
Okay.
And not that we're the only ones, but we have a native audience there. There's a ton of respect for the Chandler brand in these countries before I even look for players there.
Sure.
So I would say if you look at our rosters and the international players, 60 to 70% approach us. We're not out there. I have been to Venezuela 0 times. I've been to the Dominican Republic once, Puerto Rico a couple times. So it's not like we're traveling recruiting players there. They're coming to us in general.
Okay.
The second piece is if you look at my coaching staff, we have several players that originated in Latin American countries. So these are, Pedro Feliz, Will Nieves, Randy Ruiz, who was here, but he also has played, born and raised here, originally from New York, but has played winter ball for 15 years in Puerto Rico and the Caribbean. So the list goes on and on and on. So I think there's a native audience there that has been built because of our coaching staff, because of the brand affinity that David and the Chandler Bat Company has built within these Latin American countries. Now, don't get me wrong. There are relationships that I have built and that we have built that help us get access to other players. But in general, 60 to 70% of those international players are what I would call inbound. They reach out to us. We do not go out and recruit them or travel to those countries in order to go find players.
Let's take a short break from this call to talk about my day job, video. In 2019, if you aren't leveraging film to market your guys, you are doing them a disservice. So where do I come in? Well, filming one guy on your iPhone and texting it to coaches or posting it to Twitter is easy. But filming 25, 50, 100, or 200 is really hard. And that's why you haven't done it already. That's why smart coaches partner with Play in School. We do all the work. We come to you. We can film 100 guys in the time it would take you to film just 4 or 5. If you'd like to see every team we partner with, visit playinschool.com/teams. Contact me today to discuss the details. Now, back to the call. Now, right now in 2018, moving into 2019, is it still my understanding that the international kid can sign on July 2nd after his 16th birthday? Is that still accurate?
Correct.
Okay. My guess, and I haven't talked to you about this, but my guess is your players, do they fall into the group of kids who didn't sign at 16? And now they're looking, so they're at home in the DR, they don't sign at 16, and all of a sudden they have a whole lot less value to the people who are helping them along the way. They commonly referred to as buscones, the scouts down there. Are those the majority of the kids you're getting? That kid who missed the draft at 16 and is looking for sort of a back door to get in front of some people?
It's actually both. It's both. Historically we've had a significant percentage of international players that are 14 and 15 years old.
Interesting.
So they're not at that precipice yet where they didn't sign, and what their advisors or family or friends are telling them is because they don't get to showcase in front of scouts, whether it's college or professional, that often.
Okay.
Most of their playing experience and visibility is in workouts.
Yeah.
So for them to come up and spend 6 weeks, because if you really think about summer showcase ball, it's 6 to 8 weeks, right? For them to come up and play at Lake Point and play at the ballpark of Palm Beaches and play at JetBlue Park, those three, being prime examples, they don't get to do that often. So I think what's happening is the international amateur player that is not of age to sign an international contract, they're starting to get smarter about how they showcase themselves.
Yeah.
And the belief is, if you go out and perform, now it can go both ways, as you know.
Yeah.
Exposure is a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
But if they go out and perform, they can increase their value.
Yeah.
I mean, we were at Lake Point last year, and I walked through the gates at Lake Point, and the hour before the game, I had a shortstop. I'll keep them nameless for this conversation. 14 Major League Scouts. I couldn't even warm my team up because there were 14 Major League Scouts.
And this kid was 16?
15.
15. Now
he will be 16 by July 2nd of next year.
What are we talking about? What are we talking about here? 2 or 3 kids from the Dominican, or like just a couple? How many guys are we talking about? International guys that are playing for you during the summer?
I would say 10 to 15.
Okay, that's pretty substantial. That's 10 to 15 more than most. Now, down in your neck of the woods, there's a handful of organizations that have ties to the Dominican. There's a couple with ties that have like basically full Puerto Rican teams. That's a different story though.
Yep.
But basically, you leave South Florida and you're not seeing this. So it's a super interesting topic for me. Have you had kids who've come to play for you that got popped July 2nd of after their 16th birthday?
I actually have had a couple scenarios where kids. The answer is yes.
Okay.
With a qualification on it. So I had 2 kids this past summer from the Dominican Republic. They got early discussions with teams, and the number didn't feel right for them, right? Or for their advisor, their agent, whatever you want to call it. They came up. Both of them played one tournament. It was a prospect wire tournament in Sanford, Florida, round robin, no trophy at stake.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't 300 teams there. There was more like 60. And by the end of that tournament, I was notified by both of them they were going back to the Dominican Republic because they had only come in for a couple weeks, if that. They were going back to the Dominican Republic to sign to play in the DSL for the summer.
Okay.
One with the Phillies and one with the Indians. So, and mind you, like, I have no interest in, representing them. That's not what I do. I run a travel baseball organization, but I can tell you I was actually proud and happy for both of them. Because all they wanted to do was get an opportunity to play professional baseball. That's all they wanted. And a good buddy of mine who coached with me last year, Charlie Ramirez, who played professionally for a little bit and has set up kind of a academy model in the United States where he's helping some of these kids who may have missed that big sign-on bonus. Mm-hmm. He's helping them get visibility here.
What's his name again?
So, Charlie Ramirez.
And is he based down there in the Orlando area?
Yes, he is. So, long story short, he had kind of given me a heads up. Hey, I got these 2 kids. I'd love you to talk to them and have a conversation. And I talked to them, and they were great kids. All they wanted was an opportunity. That's it. They got the opportunity. They made the most of it. And the great part was I still keep in touch with both of them today, and they send me pictures of them in pitching, or both of them were pitchers. They send me pictures, and snapshots of their box scores and stuff like that. I mean, basically, they just wanted an opportunity, and Chandler World was willing to provide them with that opportunity.
I'm just having this vision in my head. What a contrast between, this 16-year-old kid from the Dominican comes here, performs, goes home, signs. Yeah, he's playing pro baseball, but guess what, guys? He's still living in a third world country. Contrast that versus the kid who rolled in mom and dad's, $70,000 SUV, and they'll go home to their 3,500 square foot home, in a gated community. Because let's be honest, we all know travel baseball has become quite the scene lately.
Yep.
And I'm just seeing these two kids on the same field playing next to each other, and it's kind of a wonderful thing that they can rub elbows and your income level kind of doesn't matter at that point when you're on the field, but it's such a different thing once the game is over and those kids go home.
For sure. And it's funny because, we've also had, players that, like I said, have missed that signing opportunity.
And now
I just
what?
had a player. Yeah. Well, what they're doing in increasing fashion. And again, I don't think we're the only program doing this, but I think, we certainly have been open to it the longest. They move here. They find opportunity, whether it's through a relative, a friend of a family. They move here because they still are high school eligible players in terms of age, right?
Sure.
Now you got to work on the academics and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But they basically move here and become high school players in this country. I had one player who I think the world of is named Jose Fulgencio. So Jose, I met at my tryout. Didn't know him before. He had just heard of our tryout, wanted to showcase himself. He didn't get signed last July. So he figured out a plan between his family and himself to move to Central Florida and try and link up with people that would help him get a collegiate opportunity. He's now committed. I brought him to Jupiter. He absolutely had a fantastic showing at Jupiter. And he's committed to go to HCC in outside of Tampa.
Junior college?
Correct.
Okay. That was going to be my next question. The realistic track for that for a kid like you just described, he's probably going to be an academic non-qualifier, because of SATs, because of lack of credits and core curriculum. But if he can get into a junior college system, now all of a sudden, if he can take care of business, he can either get drafted or take care of business and transfer on. Well, that's like
totally.
Hitting the lottery. That's like hitting the lottery.
Well, for sure. And he, look, he missed a couple tournaments over the summer, and he would text me and say, "Coach, I can't be there till Wednesday, or I can't be there till Saturday," because he enrolled in Florida Virtual School, and he was well aware through his academic advisor that he had to play some catch up academically, and he did it. And now, he actually, at the time, couldn't figure out what high school, because in Florida, it's kind of a free agent system now. There's whether it doesn't matter if you're in the district anymore in Florida, you can actually go to not any, but there's a lax in rules. You can live in one district and play for that same district's rival if you want.
Okay.
There's a lot more intricacy in rules to it that we won't go into now, but he actually is training and playing at a academy here, started by a good buddy of mine, Brian Martinez, who runs TNXL.
I spoke to Brian yesterday. We're going to have him on a call very soon, so we can dive into the academy model that he's running. Really looking forward to hearing more about that.
Yeah, he has 5 of my players that are playing for him, And, what they do is they take care of their academics in the morning, or they go work out in the morning, and at 1:00 every day, I'm sure Brian will tell you this when you talk to him, they're on a baseball field. So Jose, who's, kind of become like family in a very quick fashion. I mean, the kid, come over to my house and have dinner. Because I just appreciate him, and he feels the same way. He's training at the NXL under Brian and Mike Mercadante.
I got to encourage anybody that's listening to try and get a trip. You can do a baseball trip. There's all kinds of guys. As a matter of fact, right up the road from me is Sam LeBeau. He's based out of Charlottesville, Virginia. He runs the Dominican baseball camp. He will take you. He'll take your entire team to the Dominican. He'll take individual players. Try and find a way to get down there. Have an international experience, and be sure if you don't go with Sam, Sam's going to get you off of the, out of the resorts. He's going to get you out into the real world, and I would highly encourage anybody who's listening, get to the Dominican, get off the resorts, and see what it feels like to walk around in the third world country. And I can't help but think that there are probably some kids that you're dealing with that are bubble type of guys who either go undrafted at 16, or maybe they do get drafted, but it's not a great offer. That the best thing that happens in their life is either not getting drafted or just not signing, and then coming here, finishing at an American high school, getting into a junior college system, and beginning an education, because it's hard to tell a 15 or 16-year-old that baseball doesn't last forever. But you and I know that, and the fastball unfortunately won't pay for the mortgage at 40 years old the way you think it will at 15 years old. And there's no way to convince some of these kids that. And I mean, when I was down there a few years ago. It's a long story I'm not going to get into, but I ended up hooking on with Jose Cano through a friend of a friend of a friend, and we went and did some filming with a few of his guys, and driving through San Macorís. You see these guys, and the gas station attendant. He was a former prospect, and he looks like it. He was a dude, and now he's the gas station attendant. And the guy on the corner who's trying to get a quarter to wash your window, guess what? He was a dude at 1.2. He was a prospect, and he looks like it. And it's just like, what a different world we get the advantage of having. So that's a really neat thing. Yeah, you have an opportunity to really change some lives in a major way beyond a kid who lives in the lap of luxury here, and if you're living here, you're lucky. But these kids coming in and get the opportunity to hang with you for the summer, and if that can open a door, man, that is literally the definition of hitting the lottery.
Well, and it's amazing too, because during the summer, their families will find a way to come up and watch them play, and the pride they have, and the appreciation they have. Let's just say it's different.
Yeah. Which actually it is. Go ahead. I want to finish that thought.
I was going to say it's extremely different from the native expectations of amateur high school players today. I tell everybody in my organization, we have a mini camp and a meeting, and I tell them, and I bring the parents out on the field. I don't just talk to the players; I talk to the parents, and I tell them that everybody thinks a travel baseball organization will get your kid a scholarship. We get them nothing. We give them a platform. We give them an opportunity. We train them. We teach them. But every single one of those college offers they're earned. And what's happened today, particularly because I also run a youth program, 10 to 14 years old is what my youth program is. nobody understands just how hard it is to get a baseball collegiate scholarship at any level. They don't understand it, and they're losing the understanding of it. And the only reason I bring that up is in comparison to the international player, right? They feel like they're on cloud nine.
Yeah. Because
they're getting an opportunity to do something and a platform that they normally wouldn't receive. So it's an interesting contrast.
So there was thank you for all that. This is one of the more interesting conversations. It's just because I've had a little bit of experience down there, and I've been interested in the topic for a long time. And to be honest, there's a whole lot more kind of layers of this onion that we just have.
Yep.
We don't have the time for at this point in time, but maybe that's a follow-up call. The thing that keeps jumping off for me is, and talk about it in as much detail or as little detail as you want, but how is all this stuff financed? Somebody's got to pay. You had mentioned kids coming for 2 and 6 and 8 weeks at a time. Can you kind of pull back the curtain a little bit for us there?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, there's 2 ways. One is, while these countries are less fortunate in general than we are, most of my players come from families who are heavily invested in their success in baseball.
Okay.
Meaning they are willing and more than able than a lot of people would think to fund that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Secondarily, because of my coaching and instructional staff having a international background in general, they have found unique ways to have organizations provide some level of sponsorship
mm-hmm.
to our program, which in turn helps alleviate some of the costs. But in general, if you are an international player and you come play for Chandler World, you are paying your own way.
Okay.
And every advisor, family member, coach, academy, owner that I talk to, I state it implicitly that I'm not going to have one set of rules or finances for American high school players.
Yeah.
Some of which have been with me for years, and I mean years. And a different set for the international players. Now, I think fundamentally we try and keep costs down as much as we can in general, but the reality is, it is relatively self-funded with some sponsorship opportunity is what I would call it. And most of that comes from, my organization staff and coaches who have some ties to the Dominican or Colombia or Venezuela. But that's how it works.
I have a kind of a base level knowledge of the quote unquote system in the Dominican, which is where they call the Buscone, or sort of that that scout / trainer / advisor is going to take on a big burden of that kid's training and housing and feeding from an early age, and then the result being when that kid signs at 16 or whatever, that guy gets reimbursed, basically, is the way to put it, and to the tune of 30%, I think, is sort of standard, maybe more, maybe less. If I could see where one of these guys has a kid that they may just foot the bill for the kid, send them to you for 6 weeks for the summer because they know it's going to open up some opportunities. When the kid gets popped, he's going to get reimbursed anyway. I could see that. I don't know if it's happening. I don't think that's a question. I could see that happening.
For sure. in our case, if it is, that's, they're finding a way to funnel it back through the family. Because I don't, like I said, I mean, while I'm in touch with many advisors, Buscones, whatever you want to call it, I don't really have a lot of interaction with them.
Yeah.
And what happens very quickly is my ability to build a relationship with the player supersedes everything else. Mm-hmm. And they know, and even they know, I'm not trying to be an agent. I'm not trying to be an advisor. Mm-hmm. In fact, some of them have asked me to, and I said, no, that's not where my passion lies.
Yeah.
And I've been very honest with them because, some of them, a couple of them have approached me and said, look, I need an agent. Would you please be my agent? And I respectfully tell them, I'll help you find one.
Yeah. Find a pro, right?
But personally, like, that's not me.
Yeah.
And that's not who I want to be. And I got several agent buddies, and I mean really good friends of guys that I respect tremendously. I like teaching baseball. Mm-hmm. I like helping amateur baseball players. I like when a high school kid has a commitment ceremony at his high school, and they're not going to do it and sign their NLI unless I can be there. That's more important to me than anything else.
That's pretty cool. Now I want to mention something. The first time we spoke, you were kind of starting a story, and I found it to be kind of some humorous self-deprecation, and you kind of mentioned that you weren't some great big league ball player. Can you tell us about your playing background, and then lead in? We've alluded to your staff 100 different times in this conversation, but I want to talk about your kind of self-deprecation and your lowly background, as you sort of put it to me, and then tell me about these guys that you have on staff and how they came to be.
Yeah. I mean, and part of that discussion when we initially talked, I think there are too many people. Social media, has allowed a lot of people to, let me just say, bloat their credentials and their experiences. I'm not that kind of person, and I'm pretty straightforward, and blunt in terms of who I am and how I got into this business. So, my experience is simple. I was a mediocre, what I call a mediocre Division I baseball player. I had no professional prospects. I was an Army brat growing up, so I bounced around the Southeast as my dad was stationed in multiple, U.S. Army installations. So I grew up playing baseball. My parents divorced when I was 11, and I moved up to Syracuse, New York, which is, as you can imagine, not known to be a hotbed of baseball talent. And for my high school years, I probably looked a lot better than I really was. But I got an opportunity. I made a decision. Instead of playing football in college, I decided I wanted to play baseball. And I went and played for Nick Giaquinto, who was at the time the head coach of Sacred Heart University, which was Division II at the time, and was moving to Division I. And, I had a very uneventful college NCAA baseball career, times where I started and played a lot, times where I didn't. And, so the fast forward is like, I don't pretend to be a world beater when it comes to the world of baseball. I am somebody that has always been passionate about it. I like teaching kids, and I'm a business leader first and foremost, right? Which is part of the reason why David asked me to take over Chandler World, was he was confident that I could help it be run effectively, efficiently, and properly, which I have. And, one of my first items in terms of building the organization in Florida was I didn't want to build my staff, and there's nothing against these guys. They do great work. I wanted my staff, if I was convincing people to come play for my organization, I didn't want them to come play for a group of high school coaches, which is why I preempted that. Like, there are a ton of superstar high school coaches in this country, and 99% of them are underpaid for what they do. But my view was, what if you could get a group of ex-professionals to jump aboard the ship with me, and a collective group of guys that at this stage right now have over 100 years, 100 seasons of professional experience? Could we all get in the boat, row in the same direction, and make kids better? I didn't know if it would work, to be honest with you. I knew that, I could probably drive a golf ball from where I live and hit a former professional or current professional baseball player's house because of where I live.
Yeah,
so
welcome to South Florida.
Yeah, so I had access to them.
Yeah.
And I just started talking. So the first guy I hired, he literally just moved here from Colorado. So the first guy I hired to kind of build this with me was a guy by the name of Gordy Hershiser.
That's a recognizable last name. Any relation to the other Hershiser? Correct.
So Gordy is Oral's brother. Gordy's background's pretty interesting in that, family, bounced around a little bit in grade school, middle school, but ended up in Florida, Vero Beach, in case you didn't notice, and finished his high school career here, and ended up going to Indian River. JUCO kid. And Gordy's about almost 6'5". He's hard to miss when you see him. Pretty imposing presence about the guy. But when Oral was winning MVPs, he was fighting for his career in the minor leagues, also with the Dodgers, by the way. And he just finally, realized that, he had Tommy John, couldn't get it back, and decided that he was going to go another path. So I happened to stumble into him because I got to know him, and I knew his other brother who also lives here. And we just said, look, let's start out small. Let's do this the right way. Let's train. Let's invest. Let's treat kids and parents with respect and dignity, regardless of their talent. And what happened was the better players started coming, because they were playing for organizations that were trophy chasers, and we were different. We were focused on development and training and skill enhancement. So after Gordy joined me, there was kind of a plethora of ex-professionals and some current professionals that were starting to see their careers, in the late innings, that said, I want to stay involved. Like, everybody wants to make some money or a living from doing it. Nobody is going to do it for free. But, they basically had their priorities in the right spot, which was, I want to help kids. Like, that's number one. So the fast forward is Pedro Feliz, is a part-time instructor. I'll see him this weekend, actually, at our showcase tryout in Orlando. And Will Nieves, former 19-year professional, 12 seasons in the majors with a bunch of different teams as a catcher. So, you had Gordy, who obviously has a pitching pedigree. You had Pedro, who was a major league third baseman. Will Nieves, who was a major league catcher. That was the core of my staff and operation early on. And then the fast forward is you got guys, what has happened is actually a lot of ex-professionals, their kids, when they come of travel ball age, whether it's youth or high school, not all of them, but a good chunk of them have chosen to have their kids play for us. And part of their attraction is I would want my, son to be trained by professionals, people who played at the highest level. So Prince Fielder's kids play for us. I had the privilege of coaching this fall on a 12U team, AJ Przinsky's son. And so what happens is when they get in the system, they get in for the right reasons, and they all jump in some way, shape, or form to invest in the larger group of players. And, you go in our facility, I said it probably about a month ago, we had 12-year-old kids doing batting practice in our facility, and they were outnumbered by professionals. And I was like, there can't be another 12-year-old team. There just can't be another 12-year-old team practicing right now that has a dozen ex or current professional baseball players. And some of them are minor leaguers that their season was over. They come and hang out, and, they use our place. I mean, I just had a top 10 pick first rounder in my facility last weekend, just working with his hitting instructor because I've known him for a while. But there couldn't have been another 12-year-old team that literally was getting individual instruction at that point from an ex-major league or a minor league player.
That's pretty cool.
So, again, the value proposition really is, if we're going to teach kids how to play the game professionally, I just thought, well, why don't we have professionals teach them? And that's the path forward.
Sounds like you've surrounded yourself with some pretty good people. That's pretty smart.
Yep. Yeah, and I've learned a lot. So I mean, and it's funny. It's funny, even look, and I've been able to give it back to them because, like I tell people, I'm the least qualified coach and instructor in my entire organization when it comes to pedigree and background. But we've taught each other a lot of things, and what we're going through now with Flight Scope and Rapsodo, a lot of these professionals, like, they missed the confluence and the integration of data. They missed a lot of it. So because I am a executive search professional, a headhunter focused on the technology industry, I know more about technology and data than they ever will. Mm-hmm. So there's a synergistic relationship there that we all make each other better.
This has been fascinating stuff, Jason. I appreciate it, but I'm also looking at the clock, and I know you have somewhere to be, and I have somewhere to be too. A lot of times I spend quite a bit of time. We talk about recruiting. We talk about kind of the state of travel baseball. You guys have some different things going on, so it was really fascinating to hear about those things that are unique to Chandler World, and we may have to do a follow up and talk about those other things that are my usual topics. But I would like to ask you kind of one last couple questions, maybe just one question that maybe is something to do with baseball, maybe it's not, but if there were a piece of advice that you could give a coach who was thinking about jumping into travel baseball, what do you tell that guy? What do you tell that person who's thinking about getting into travel coaching?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. What I would tell that person is have a vision and a philosophy. Whether it's your organization or whether it's an organization or a single team, right? Mm-hmm. Have a vision and a philosophy and be unbreakable at following it. That's the one thing that I think, and even when David Chandler asked me to take over all of Chandler World, we sat down for a long time and I shared with him my vision and my philosophy. And, there are times as you start to grow an organization, or it grows faster than, there's times where it grows faster than you're ready, by the way. And I've been through 2 cycles like that. But You know, I would tell people, or somebody that wants to start a team or an organization, have a vision, have a philosophy, and stick to it. It's easy in the travel ball world, and, you know, I'm surrounded by organizations that have been around for 15, 20 plus years.
Yeah.
Right. I am in Central Florida. And I tell people I'm not trying to be, and I don't say this with any disrespect, because I respect FTB. I respect George. I respect what Bob is doing and what the Scorpions have done historically. For, you know, I'm not trying to be them.
Sure.
Right? That's not my goal. I am not trying to be another organization. I am trying to be Chandler World. And what I tell people all the time, and they probably get sick of it because it's my tagline in my email, you know, we are focused on the relentless pursuit of being different.
Oh, you took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, and I say different is better.
Don't be better, be different. It is
Yep.
what I was thinking as you were describing that, and that it is such a good lesson to learn. Let's golly, this was awesome. I really appreciate it. Let's wrap it up. I know you're probably about to walk into where you're walking into, and God, this was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Same here, man. I appreciate it.
And by the way, hopefully people are still hanging on with us if you're listening, and I'll put all this in the show notes. But it's the Twitter handle for Chandler is @ChandlerTeams. That's where I hooked up with Jason. I'll put all that stuff in the website when it goes live. It'll be playinschool.com/Slattery. Slattery, playinschool.com/Slattery. I'll make sure I put all the links to things we discussed on here. And Jason, man, my pleasure. This was
Same here.
This was
I appreciate
so fun and really insightful and not better but different. It's so different, so cool.
There you go.
Incredible. Thank you so much.
All right, man.
Let's catch up real soon.
You got it. Let's plan on it. Appreciate it.
You guys, see ya.
Take care, bud.
I'm having so much fun bringing these shows to you each week. If you'd like to recommend a coach for the show, please don't hesitate to shoot me a note at rich@playinschool.com or DM me on Twitter @playinschool. Again, my name is Rich Prado. I'm the founder of Play in School. My goal is to continue to create products and services that add value to you, the travel ball coaches, your players, and their parents. Visit playinschool.com to see some of the ways we're doing that. Or better yet, let's set up a call. Until next time, thank you for listening to Travel Ball Talk.